Hello and welcome to Church and State with Stephen Kokx. This is a show dedicated to all things Catholicism, all things politics, and everything in between. Several weeks ago, I had on Dr. Edmund Mazza to discuss the purported resignation of Benedict XVI. Little did I know the amount of controversy that would cause. Among other things, boomer Catholics on social media started attacking us. You're promoting schism, heresy, conspiracy theories. Sure, Jan. One wonders if these attention seekers even understand that Leo is a full-throated modernist carrying on the modernist Masonic agenda of Vatican II. Good luck defending that. Interestingly enough, just several days after our podcast, on August 7th, an Italian website reported that Monsignor Nicola Bux, will be including in an upcoming book a photograph, or photocopy rather, of a letter allegedly written by Benedict XVI in 2014, saying that he did in fact resign his office. If true, this raises a lot of questions. Namely, why did Bux purportedly hold on to this letter for 11 years? Is it fake, and why release it now? Others might be thinking, who cares about this stuff anyway? Benedict's been dead for years, and he ain't coming back. But the fact remains that in 2016, Archbishop Georg Gonswein, Benedict's personal secretary, publicly said at the Pontifical Gregorian University in Rome that Francis and Benedict are not two popes in competition with one another. Rather, they represent an expanded Petrine office with one active member and one contemplative member. To discuss this, as well as Bux's purported letter, as well as other aspects of this ever-evolving, seemingly endless story, I want to bring on Dr. Mazza back to the program. Thank you, Dr. Mazza, for being here.
Oh, thanks for having me back.
So I'm going to give you the unenviable task of straightening this all out for us, because it just, twist after turn, and this Monsignor Bux alleged letter is the latest to the story. So, but before we get to that, actually, can you just explain who this Monsignor Bux is? I don't think everybody watching knows who he is, and I myself am not as familiar as I should be with him.
Yes, Monsignor Bux is from the Diocese of Bari, Italy. He was a collaborator with Joseph Ratzinger at the Vatican, and he has written several books. And the controversy is that he in his most recent book, as you mentioned, has a photographic reproduction of a letter which he says is from Pope Benedict Emeritus, and that he received it exactly 11 years ago this week. Apparently, you have to purchase the book to see the complete letter, but some snippets from it have been released. And in those snippets, if they are genuine, Benedict says that he has resigned not only the ministry, I'm paraphrasing, but the munus. And this letter to Bux was in response to a letter that Bux had written to Benedict in July of 2014. And at that time, just a little background for the folks, at that time, Vaticanista Vittorio Mezzuri had written an article in Corriere della Sera arguing that we have two popes. This is 2 years before Archbishop Gonswein made his famous and perplexing speech at the
yes. Let's bring that up right now, actually, because I wanted to again remind our viewers of that, because again, Bux is alleging that in 2014 he was given this letter. Okay. But at the same time here, again, this is 2016, so 2 years after that, 2 years later, in fact. And Bishop Gonswein was Benedict's secretary, a very close friend. And, well, what does he say? He's saying, again, that there's an expanded Petrine office, right? And here's the direct quote here we're looking for. Speaking at the Gregorian University at the time, they're not two popes in competition, but an active and a contemplative member. So kind of odd timing, I would say, 2 years later for Gonswein to say this when Bux is now saying that.
Full disclosure, Stephen, full disclosure, the day that Benedict departed in the helicopter February 28th, 2013, Ganswein, in an interview in the Italian newspaper Avvenire, explained why he took the title Pope Emeritus. Yeah, I think the newbies out there need to know that this has never happened in 2,000 years of Catholic history, that a resigning pope would not go back to being Cardinal so-and-so, but would suddenly take on the persona of Pope Emeritus and still wear white and still give apostolic blessings in his own name and still live in the Vatican. And the answer that Ganswein gave to the reporter was, quote, Ratzinger considers that this title corresponds to reality, unquote. Meaning, in some sense, he is still Pope, right? Yeah. So Ganswein makes this statement the very day that Ratzinger, goes off in the helicopter, and then as you just gave the folks the quote, 2 years later at this speech at the Greg, he says, look, Ratzinger did not give up the office. It's just a collegial thing now. So yeah.
Let's read then from the actual letter. It says here, allegedly, here's a quote from the Daily Compass. Here's allegedly what Ratzinger told Monsignor Bux. To say that in my resignation, I would have left only the exercise of the ministry and not also the munus is contrary to clear dogmatic canonical doctrine. If some journalists speak of a creeping schism, they do not deserve any attention. So that seems to be the heart of the matter there then. Yes, your thoughts.
Yeah. So the first thing I would say to that is that there are quotes that are attributed to Pope Benedict that are kind of hard to swallow. And I think that that's one of them right there. But it's by no means the only one. For example, when he, again, stepped down or stepped to the side or whatever, or became a contemplative pope instead of an acting pope, they asked him, why are you still wearing white? And do you remember what his answer was?
I don't. It's a good question. Yeah. What was it?
He said, well, there were no black cassocks available in Rome at the time of my resignation.
That one? Okay. Right.
And, for those who might not know it, I mean, there are shops all over, Borgo Pio that sell clerical garb.
Sure.
And it's not so difficult to get a black cassock.
Yeah. Well, it just seems odd. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, please. Go ahead.
Well, to me, it doesn't seem to line up. 11 years later, he's been holding on to this for so long. Why now? I guess I have to ask: have you had any ever interactions with him? I mean, it seems he's commented on this story before. I know there's a quote that he gave to Micah Hickson at LifeSite in 2020. We'll bring that up in a second. But it doesn't seem that he was a man with this letter in his possession for the last 11 years.
Yeah. So before I share a little bit of what I have personally corresponded with Monsignor Bux over the last few years. Before I get to that, let me reproduce for you a quote from Bux from 2018, October of 2018. And this was to Vaticanista Aldo Maria Valli. So this would have been 4 years after he has this alleged letter from Benedict saying, I did resign both the munus and the ministerium, and paraphrasing. And then Bux tells Valli, October 13th, 2018, actually, they're having a long conversation, and they're, among other things, they talked about the sede vacantis theory that a public heretic would automatically lose office, and therefore Bergoglio was not the Pope. But Bux seemed to want to get away from that and preferred to study the resignation of Benedict. And this is what he says. He says, we ought, quote, to study more accurately the question concerning the juridical validity of Pope Benedict XVI's renunciation, whether it was full or partial or doubtful, since the idea of a collegiate papacy seems to me decidedly against the gospel text. And he says, in the end, he says, perhaps a thorough study of the resignation could be more useful and profitable, i.e., more useful and profitable than theories of loss of office due to heresy on Bergoglio's part, right? Mm-hmm. So a thorough study of the resignation could be more useful and profitable, as well as helping to overcome problems that today seem insurmountable to us. What? What you talking about, Willis? How could you be in possession of an authentic letter from Benedict where he says, oh, no, I resigned everything. There's nothing to see here. And then he turns around, he makes this statement that we should question and do a thorough study on the juridical validity or lack thereof of Benedict's resignation.
Yeah. Yeah. And he spoke with you as well, right? You said he congratulated you on your work too?
A little bit of what, well, first of all, I was inspired partly by Monsignor Bux, by that very statement I just read to you, to start researching this issue. I was also inspired by Father Nicholas Gruner, who in 2014, he caught on to this much earlier than anybody else. In the fall of 2014, Father Gruner came out and said, well, if Benedict did not resign the munus, he didn't resign the papacy, and therefore Francis is not a real pope. So anyway, I go into all of this in my 2023 book, The Third Secret of Fatima and the Synodal Church, and this is volume 1, Pope Benedict's resignation. And anyway, in 2023, a few months after the book came out, I corresponded in an email with Monsignor Bux, and he congratulated me on my book. If the topic is closed for discussion, why would he congratulate me on my book? What else can I recall from our limited email exchange here? He let's see if I can find something else that he said to me. I sent him even before that. In 2021, I sent Monsignor an article where I talk about the distinction between munus and ministerium. Mm-hmm. And he said to me, it seems like a good contribution. He also said, you're right to seek the roots of the resignation in Vatican II, which is something we'll get to when we talk about Vegano's response to this. And then I can also give you another quote from Monsignor Bux, also from 2023. He wrote a preface to an Italian book called, let me get the name straight, Non Era Più Lui. And in this preface, he says that, he kind of says different things that are hard to reconcile. For one thing, he says the essence of the papacy is the ministry, not the munus. And so he who renounces the ministry is no longer pope. Now that seems to be backwards, because most scholars would say it's the munus that is the office, the ontological being, and the ministry is simply the practical doing, right? But anyway, and then he goes on to acknowledge what he said to Aldo Maria Valli. And again, this is an English translation of the Italian preface from 2023. He says, of course, as I wrote years ago in an interview with my friend Aldo Maria Valli, there may be aspects of that renunciation which should be studied in depth by scholars, as is only right. This writer, in addition to having been consulted on the matter, along with others, less than a year after the election, spoke with Benedict a year after the renunciation and had confirmation, even written confirmation. So that's an allusion. So in early 2023, in this preface, he's alluding to this letter from Benedict, allegedly from Benedict, which is now reproduced in his 2025 book that's coming out this summer, right? And then lastly, he adds, and again, it's all very confusing. He says, unfortunately, ignorance of history and law does not allow most to understand today's affair, even if it does present points of debate, such as that of the shared papacy. Now, wait for it. Listen to this. which certainly seems that it can be traced back to Ratzinger's own mind, even if it was explicated by the former secretary, Monsignor Georg Ganswein. So on the one hand, he's saying there's nothing to see here, the Ratzinger resignation was valid. And on the other hand, he turns around and says, yes, this idea of a shared papacy, it's not from Georg Ganswein, it's from the mind of Ratzinger himself.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you a two-part question here then. What percentage do you give that this is either going to be authentic, and perhaps it even is, but we don't know, again, the context of things, and as you're saying, there's reason to doubt some of these things that Benedict said at various points. But then secondly, why is Bux including this in the book? And is it part of a larger effort here? Is there a sort of revitalization of interest in this topic, and this is the conciliar authorities trying to throw cold water on it yet again?
Well, I believe, as you and Chris Jackson and Father Nix and others have pointed out, over the last 100 days of Prevost's occupation of the Vatican, there's been a full court press to have Trad Inc. toe the line and not portray Leo as the extension of Francis, but rather as a traditional or tradition leaning, in the other direction. So it seems to me that Trad Inc. was never in favor of the idea that Benedict did not resign properly. I mean, I could not get published in, for example, Crisis Magazine or First Things or even The Remnant. And so it seems to me that this is a corollary to the narrative, to the psyop, to, again, make it look like anything that suggests that Francis was not a valid pope or that Leo is not a valid pope is fringe and is contradicted by Benedict's own statements. But again, even if, it's hard to know what statements from Benedict are actually from Benedict. And even if they are from Benedict, should they be believed? I gave you the quote earlier where Benedict said, yeah, the reason why I wear white is because we couldn't find any black cassocks in Rome when I resigned. But I got another quote for you. This is from 2016. He told Peter Seewold, I do not see any contradiction between my theology and Pope Francis's theology. Do we really think that Benedict said that? And did he have a gun to his head at the time, or were there, was there a punishment room waiting for him if he failed to toe the line? So, who knows what pressures Bux may have been subjected to? I don't have any firsthand knowledge, obviously, but I will say this: anyone who contravenes the narrative, bad things seem to happen to them. I mean, Cardinal Pell, for example, has an unfortunate post-operative experience, right? Archbishop Vigano, his location is still hidden, I take it, and gets allegedly excommunicated. Other people, they just have their character assassinated. So who knows what's going on? But it seems to me it's a full court press to suppress anything that deviates from the narrative.
Well, you mentioned Archbishop Vigano. Has he responded to this? I know he wrote about this previously. I think it was last year, in fact. What has he been saying?
Yes. So because of this book coming out this month, Vaticanista Marco Tossati decided to republish a letter, an essay that Archbishop Vigano had published on the Feast of St. Andrew of last year. And in that essay, and then Robert Moynihan at Inside the Vatican, in his Moynihan letters, also reproduced this. So it's out there on the internet in more than one location, both in Italian and in English translation. And to sum up again, Vegano says that he is aware of the fact that at a conference that took place earlier in November, Bux mentioned that he has this letter from Benedict, which says that he did resign the munus and the resignation is valid. And, there's nothing to see here. We should stop talking about this, right? Mm-hmm. And Vegano responds, and it's rather lengthy, about the desacralization of the papacy, and the desacralization, the resignation of Benedict is part and parcel of the desacralization of the papacy, just as much as Bergoglio's usurpation is. Here's a quote from Vegano. Quote, "There is an obvious," and by the way, critics have said that, you see, even Vegano recognizes the authenticity of Benedict's alleged 2014 letter to Bux, right? But even though he apparently accepts the authenticity of it, he still disputes the validity of Benedict's resignation. And so what he says here is, there is an obvious contradiction between the goal Benedict set for himself, i.e., to renounce the papacy, and the means he chose to do so, based on the invention of the Pope Emeritus. This contradiction, in which Benedict subjectively resigned, but objectively produced a canonical monstrum, constitutes an act so subversive as to render the renunciation null and void. In due time, this contradiction will have to be remedied by an authoritative pronouncement. But the inescapable fact remains that the form in which the renunciation was placed does not remove the subsequent irregularities that led Bergoglio to usurp the throne of Peter with the complicity of the deep church and the deep state. Nor is it possible to think that the renunciation should not be read in the light of the subversive plan that aimed to oust Benedict XVI and replace him with an emissary of the globalist elite. Your Excellency,
excellent.
You're holding back. Tell me what you really think.
Well, I think he added to that too. Even just today on Twitter, I saw this, and he drives home that statement you're reading from. That was from last year, 2024. Mm-hmm. And His Excellency says this now, just in a tweet today: the conciliar synodal revolution undermines the authority of the Roman Pontiff and the authority of the bishops as successors of the apostles, as you just read here, dissolving both into spurious entities such as episcopal conferences, the synod of bishops, and ecclesial conferences, etc. I think this is, though, worth highlighting, and I want you to respond to this too, because later in the tweet, he brings up points that you have mentioned before on this show about how it was in the 70s where Ratzinger and Rahner started to formulate the idea of a collegial papacy, right? And so Archbishop Vegano goes through a timeline linking everything to Vatican II, Lumen Gentium, the setting up of episcopal conferences. 1970, he says the theorization of the collegial and emeritus papacy. And then finally here, 2013, where the bifurcation occurs. And then he also links it into synodality and the further dissolution of the office. What do you think of this tweet, which again, I think just reiterates what you just read there?
Yeah, exactly. I think that this tweet that you're sharing with me, this is the first time I'm hearing it. I think he's reiterating what he said in that November 30th, 2024 essay of his, which again, Marco Tossati has republished on his blog. And again, for those that may not be aware of this, during the 1970s, there was a push to demythologize the papacy and to make it acceptable to the Lutherans. My friends, Ann Barnhart and Mark Doherty of the Non Veni Pacem blog, they discovered a dissertation by Cardinal Miller from 1980, which talks about ecumenism and rethinking the papacy. This was the thing among the theologians, especially in the 1970s. And even John Paul II in Ut Unum Sint, sounds like, I think, 1995, comes out and says, we need to rethink I'm paraphrasing, but I'm open to the idea of rethinking the papacy in such a way that we keep what's necessary, but we can change it around to suit ecumenical tastes. So this has been going on for decades. And what Vegano did in his November essay is he says, quote, Cardinal Brandmüller, confided to me in January 2020 that Joseph Ratzinger was developing the theory of the Pope Emeritus and a shared papacy, a collegial papacy, with his colleague Karl Rahner in the 1970s. And that's the quote, as you mentioned, that when you had me on the show last time, that I read. And this is backed up with another quote that I read last time from Rahner, where Rahner, in a book that he wrote in 1974, says that, I'll paraphrase a little bit here, and then I'll read the exact quote. Rahner, who, again, was the darling of all the seminaries and back in the 1970s, he says, look, when a pope dies, the cardinals at the conclave act as a body. They act as a collective. And they seem to have supreme authority, or at least they have the authority to elect the next pope. Well, he says, well, if that's the case, why, quote, cannot a council lead a particular church in principle, or why is it that the bearer of supreme Petrine authority can only be an individual, unquote? So there you have it right there in black and white. You've got Rahner saying, the papacy could be shared between two people.
Yeah. Now, let me ask you a really simple question. Why would they want that? Why attack the papacy, and why try to expand it in the first place? I mean, is it just that it's in their modernist nature to destroy everything that's Catholic? I mean, why even do this in the first place, or why even theorize about it?
Well, two things. One is that this was not the first time that this was attempted. As a shameless plug, as I point out in my book, they tried doing this in the 1600s, 1700s, during the time of Jansenism. And Pope, I forget, let me see if I can find the exact name of the Pope that was involved. But if you go into Denzinger, and of course, Denzinger is a collection of, dogmatic statements. In 1647, Pope Innocent declared that the notion of a shared papacy is heretical. And let's see if I can find the exact phraseology of that here. Give me a sec. Here we go. This was a decree of the Holy Office, which later became the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, which now is known as the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith, and is currently run by Heal Me With Your Mouth, Touch Me Fernandez, but not to get sidetracked on that. Here is what the Holy Office said in 1647. The Holy Father has decreed and declared heretical the proposition presented that establishes an exact equality between St. Peter and St. Paul without the subordination and subjection of St. Paul to St. Peter in supreme power and in the rule of the universal church. It also condemns the idea, quote, that there are two Catholic heads and supreme leaders of the Catholic Church joined in highest unity between themselves. And then there's other, I don't want to go on at length here, but clearly Rahner is promoting heresy. This was condemned in 1647, this idea that you could have more than one individual at a time acting as pope.
So I guess let me ask then, what other responses has this revelation elicited in the mainstream media? I have seen some neoconservatives, etc., say this closes the door on the whole thing. Right? This shuts it. And Dr. Mazza Stephen, you're promoting conspiracy theories. You're discredited. I mean, what do you say to them? And secondly, what other responses has this caused so far? Any reaction?
Yes, well, it's hard to keep track of everything. But what
I did see Father Nix wrote a blog about it, I think.
That's true. I really liked that piece by Father Nix. Well, again, Father Nix said, and I think maybe you could pull it up there.
Yep. Yeah.
Is that well, the headline says it all, right? Why the bifurcated papacy still matters is because, as previously Vegano had pointed out, this idea of the collegial papacy, this Vatican II resignation, which is not a resignation, undermines the traditional Catholic faith. This is part and parcel of Vatican II and synodality, ultimately.
This is a pretty good remark here. I'll read just to get everybody up to date. And Father Nix is writing this. He's quoting Benedict's resignation, a statement that he gave to the cardinals back then. It's 2013. Or is it 2012, Doc? Is it 2013 or 2012 when he resigned? The always is also a forever. This is Benedict. There can no longer be a return to the private sphere. My decision to resign the active exercise of the ministry does not revoke this. I do not return to private life, to a life of travel, etc. I am not abandoning the cross. I no longer bear the power of the office of government of the church, but in the service of prayer, I remain, so to speak, in the enclosure of St. Peter. So again, to your point, seeking an expanded Petrine ministry. And Father Nix, obviously, with the rejoinder here, does a semi-resignation exist? Of course not. And that is why we are going to see how that novelty foisted upon the chair of St. Peter's continues the destruction within the Vatican to this day. So go and read Father Nix's blog there. Further thoughts on what Father Nix is saying here, Dr. Edmund.
And by the way, Steve, when he says, I'm not giving up the cross, as I point out in my book, back in 1977, Ratzinger wrote a homily in which he said that the chair of Peter is a cross. So, and he goes into obviously more detail on that.
We got to get your book for sure for our readers. Please go and buy that. Excellent. So I guess let me sort of ask a sort of a devil's advocate position or question. I mean, so why does this continue to matter? I mean, Benedict's dead. This happened, over 10 years ago. We've had Francis in the meantime. We now have another occupant or claimant to the papacy. Are we just, grinding our gears here over something just to, I don't know, maybe you're just attention seeking, Doctor? I mean, why be so fixated on this? What's the real story?
Well, as the late, great Father Nicholas Gruner used to say, it's world enslavement or peace. It's up to the Pope. Our Lady of Fatima said that the Pope has to consecrate Russia to her Immaculate Heart together with all the Catholic bishops, or otherwise God will use Russia as the instrument to chastise the whole world. And as you can see, we're on the brink of that when you consider what's happening right now in Ukraine. So there were certain people, and I'll even throw Ratzinger in here, who tried to consign the Fatima message to the 20th century and to the attempted assassination of John Paul II in 1981. But later on, Benedict contradicted himself and said that anybody who thinks that the prophetic dimension of Fatima is over is kidding themselves. The prophetic dimension continues to hang over us. The reason why we must insist on finding out whether or not Benedict resigned properly is because we need to figure out whether we have or don't have a legit pope, because it's almost 100 years since Our Lady of Fatima passed on that request from heaven that the Pope consecrate Russia to her Immaculate Heart. If not, Russia will go throughout the world, causing wars and persecutions of the church. And as Our Lady of Akita said, which according to Ratzinger is a continuation of Fatima, Our Lady of Akita said that fire will fall from the sky and that the living will envy the dead. So it's in the interests of every man, woman, and child to get to the bottom of whether or not we have a legitimate pope.
You've used this term before, and I think we're at a good point in the interview to bring it up again when we chatted last time, that you'd prefer the term, and correct me if I'm wrong, interregnumist. Is that how you identify
I would
it?
shorten it to lose a syllable and call it an interregnist.
Okay. And what does this term mean? Why that term instead of the more common, the used instead of vacantist?
Yes. Well, certain critics of mine, and some are more vocal than others, have called me a semi-vacantist or a bene-vacantist, or,
Sure.
call me anything, but don't call me late for dinner. The fact of the matter is that in church history, we've had dozens and dozens of anti-popes, okay? And we've had more than that in terms of popes dying, and then there being an interlude, an interregnum, and then a new pope being elected. In fact, the longest interregnum that we've ever had was almost 3 years between the death of one pope and the election of the next pope. And we're still within that window from the death of Pope Benedict XVI, assuming that he was the legitimate pope and that Bergoglio was not. So rather than confuse me with a 1958 sedevacantist, I think it's better to say interregnist. That's basically the reason.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, I think there's some studies who would not take issue so much with that, but I think, in the same sense, they would say, some of them maybe, we've had an interregnum for that long. And I think there's, conversations that I have with friends about this. They draw a parallel to the Babylonian captivity, right? 70 years, right? And I think, when was Vatican II closed? 1965. So we're coming up on, was it 60 years?
Yeah, that's like I said, I'm, again, a shameless plug. I'm offering a course this fall on Vatican II at 60. Mm-hmm. And I'm also offering a 6-part video series for those that are interested. Trads, Sedes, Conservatives, who's got it right? I am not a sedevacantist, or at least not a 1958 sedevacantist. I think that respectfully, I disagree with them. And those that want to learn more can sign up for that and get that out to you. I do think it's important that we dialogue. And that's what we talked about last time. I think that I think Chris Jackson had a good summary of the debate between Matthew McCusker, who I take it as a sedevacantist, and my friend Matt Gaspers, who is a recognize and resist. And after describing the debate that's been ongoing for the past year between the two of them, Chris Jackson says that they do have certain things in common, and the main thing is that we realize they both realize the critical situation that we're in right now, and that it is necessary to dialogue about these things and not sweep them under the rug. It is important to talk about these things, and that's why I'm grateful to you and to other people like yourself who are not afraid to talk about these issues. In the Middle Ages, in the universities, they used to have debates on things. Aquinas in his Summa is following the scholastic method of debate. They had to, in my other book, the scholastics and the Jews, I talk about the fact that the Dominicans in the 13th century actually staged debates between Dominican friars and Jewish rabbis. So there's nothing wrong with doing dialogue, as it were, in the traditional Catholic way, not the, peace, love, and
yes,
puff the magic dragon.
It's geared towards the solution. Yeah, it's geared towards the solution, right? We're here to discover the truth, not just to dialogue for dialogue's sake, and then to test our theses and have actual opponents who have different views on that. Regarding this story, though, regarding Monsignor Bux, what have we missed? Have we got to everything? I think, Doctor. Today it seems we've kind of come to the completion of that. Where do you see this maybe going in the future? I mean, because obviously, as we mentioned earlier, the conciliarists are going to say, this closes the door. What's the next step, maybe, in all of this? I mean, if this is allegedly sort of the last part of what they would say is the story.
Yes. Well, I think the next shoe to drop is going to be some affirmation of Bergoglio's theological agenda. I mean, it's only been 100 days of Prevost, so he hasn't really come out. And, there's no apostolic exhortations yet. There's no encyclicals yet, right? There's no synods yet. But we're going to know pretty soon just how devoted he is to his predecessor. In fact, I argued on air that the reason why he chose the name Leo is not after Leo the 13th, but according to one South American blogger, the reason why Prevost chose the name Leo is because brother Leo, was the beloved companion of Saint Francis of Assisi. So if Bergoglio took Francis as his patron, he, in a subtle way, I think this was a nod to say that I'm going to be the promoter of Francis. I'm brother Leo. I'm Pope Leo.
That's fascinating theory. I hadn't heard of that before. We will see what happens. And you mentioned this, so I'm going to bring this up. Just my own self plug for today. Just published this blog today at Cox News. Leo's first 100 days promoting the heresies of Francis and Vatican II. Go check that out. It's going to blow the lid off of everything you've been seeing in Triad Inc. and then also covering the first 100 days. So, Dr. Mazza, thank you so much for being on today. Do you have anything else to share to our audience on this topic or anything else?
Yes, we really need to pray the rosary, obviously, every day, wear the brown scapular, because this is the Marian hour. Okay. The Immaculate Heart, she said, in the end, my Immaculate Heart will triumph. But the question is that going to happen before or after a great chastisement? So, this year is the 100th anniversary of her asking us for the first Saturday devotion. And as I say, when 2029 comes, it will be 100 years since she asked for the collegial consecration of Russia by the Pope and all the bishops. So we need to get to the bottom of this Pope issue because we need the consecration of Russia because, as much as these diplomatic efforts are helpful, the only solution for peace is the triumph of Our Lady's Immaculate Heart and the conversion of Russia. And that's only going to happen when we get a legit Pope and bishops doing the consecration.
Yes. Amen to that. Thank you so much for your time today and all your research on this topic. I know there's a lot more we could probably get to in a future episode, but I'll have to even think about what to ask you next time because we're getting to the bottom.
Well, be careful, Stephen, because in some countries, having Mazza on repeatedly is the equivalent of waterboarding.
Well, good penance for the viewers then. Okay, that's all right. No, thank you so much, Doc. Appreciate it. Thank you everybody for tuning in today and watching. Continue to support us on Twitter, on Cox News Substack, as well as our YouTube channel. Subscribe and like. And thank you again, Doctor. Thank you everybody else for watching. Take care and God bless you.